Central Bank Monetary Policy Committee meeting increased interest rate to 17.5%. Senate appeals for extension of Naira redesign change as deadline nears. And the federal government constitutes 14-man steering committee for supply, distribution of petroleum products. Plus, Asia-Pacific shares trade mixed, tracking Wall Street struggle for direction. This is Business Express on the network service of the NTA, and we are reaching you from Abuja, the nation's capital. I am Benny Adams, your guide. Good to have you join us at this time. We'll start by telling you that the sensitization and enforcement exercise carried out by the Central Bank in Taraba State is yielding result as most automated machines dispense new Naira notes to customers. Correspondent Godwin Inaliku reports that traders and villagers have been rushing to the nearest banks to deposit before the January 31st deadline.
The monitoring exercise, as explained by the Apex Bank, is to ensure all ATMs are stocked with the redesigned new Naira notes in compliance with the directive of the CBN to ensure circulation of new currencies even at the rural communities. The team later carried out sensitization campaign to Jalingo Market, where they sensitized traders and members of the public on the need to open bank accounts with deposit banks of their choice.
We are a special team that was dispatched from Abuja by the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria to ensure that the exercise for the redesign of the Naira notes is being successfully implemented.
These are all security features, so that it's difficult for anybody to then the watermark too. If you hold it against the light, you see these pictures. You can see the pictures there again. So these are really very difficult for anyone to counterfeit.
The enforcement team later extended the frontier of the sensitization campaign to paramount rulers of the state to urge the monarchs extend the campaign to nooks and crannies of the state.
I will call on my contemporaries, not even in Taraba State, in all over Nigeria, to call their subjects, to hasten, to advise them the way out of it, so that the Trojan ones in the village should not suffer.
No matter how small a village is, there must be a bank or POS close to it. A day after the sensitization, most of the automated teller machines in the metropolis were dispensing the new Naira notes, a situation the people describe as a good development. In Jalingo, Godwin Inaliku, NTA News.
Still talking about the new Naira notes ahead of the bank's window for acceptance of old Naira notes. The Apex Bank has embarked on the physical exchange of old notes with the redesigned notes across rural areas of Yobe State. Adam Yusuf reports that the initiative is to accelerate cash swap and serve as a platform to further sensitize the communities on the government cashless policy.
Queues are not at ATM points or marketplace, but at the palaces of emirs of Genzerma and Damagun in Funi local government area of Yobe State. The exercise is swapping of the old Naira notes with the new notes and outreach to the rural communities by the CBN. This is a deliberate strategy adopted by the Apex Bank to ensure that rural dwellers across Nigeria have access to the redesigned currencies with less stress and meet the deadline of 31st January. Leading the exercise in communities in Yobe State, the CBN Director of Statistics for Borno and Yobe State, Muhammad Tumala, stated that the initiative is directly targeted at the people with no bank accounts, with a view to change their old Naira notes to new notes on the spot, and also sensitize them on the new policies.
These are rural population. They are small holders of money, and that is why we are asking them to directly swap their small amounts, okay, through the agents and the help of the staff of the banking system.
The campaign in Yobe State is continuing in several communities identified with no commercial banks, where transactions are difficult to conduct, including Gaidam, Yusufari, Gujba, and Gulani local government areas, in addition to border communities in Damaturu. Adam Yusuf.
Still on the new Naira notes, Senate has urged the Central Bank of Nigeria to immediately extend the deadline for the use of the old Naira notes from January 31st to July 31st, 2023. Senate, through a motion of urgent public importance by Senator Sadiq Umar, highlighted challenges faced by some Nigerians in trying to exchange the old ones with the new ones, and therefore advised the Apex Bank to also establish a special exchange window for those who don't have bank accounts.
However, in countries that operate with order, as seen in the United Kingdom, new notes are currently in circulation and they are running smoothly along with the old currencies.
Although I may be the only person opposing it, but I want to stand based on my conviction and principle, Mr. President. Change is always difficult in every situation, especially when we have a culture and we want to change that culture. It's always difficult. Nigerians have the culture, especially in the rural areas, of not banking their money.
Policies by the central bank to ensure that we have banks, branches of banks established more in our rural areas.
That's why we are here.
Coming back to the real issue, we have received reports from different parts of the country. I was awake up to 3 a.m. this morning, and the issues are, you see a clip, you see a message telling you this program is going to make me bankrupt.
Meanwhile, the House of Representatives has urged President Muhammadu Buhari to intervene in the implementation of the cashless policy and currency swap following the insistence of the Central Bank of Nigeria to continue despite tight deadline.
The currencies are not forced out of circulation, they are phased out of circulation. The bulk Nigerian economy is driven by SME and petty traders. Therefore, there is need for some review of the policy.
Let's move it back to 6 months, that we should gradually phase out in 6 months.
Only 1 million naira was given to people in Kirawa to swap, where they have more than 100 million naira.
It looks like this might have been a policy where the cart was put before the horse. Certain things should have been in place before the policy was rolled out, as good as the policy is.
Well, a little bit away from the new Naira notes, the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank raised the policy rate by 100 basis points to 17.5% and retained all parameters. Governor of the CBN, Godwin Emefiele, while reading out the communique, addressed other burning financial issues. Leah Katubabatunde completes the story.
It is the first meeting of the Monetary Policy Committee for the year. Considered are the local and global fundamentals as well as their outlook. With a mandate to rein in inflation, a December reduction to 21.34% from 21.47% recorded in November 2022 is a far cry from the single-digit target Nigeria set for herself. The MPC therefore voted to raise MPR to 17.5% and retain all other parameters.
This is because loosening under a double-digit inflationary condition will be tantamount to an immediate reversal of the expected further downward trend in inflation. The committee also felt that loosening will negate the objective of dampening the pent-up aggregate demand that fueled the rise in inflation post-COVID-19 pandemic.
Governor Emefiele then advised Nigerians to take advantage of the window given by the Apex Bank to return their old notes as the January 31 date for the end of the exercise remains. He also explained that the Ways and Means advances given to the federal government is normal, considering the circumstances that face this administration: a double recession, a fall in global crude oil prices that slashed income, coronavirus, and geopolitical tensions. President Muhammadu Buhari is seeking to securitize the 23.7 trillion naira advance by the Central Bank of Nigeria in the last 10 years to the federal government.
We feel as CBN, because we are a lender of last resort, that it will be irresponsible for us to sit idle. It will be a dereliction in our responsibilities and duties as lender of last resort to ignore the government and allow the economy and our Nigerians to suffer.
Emefiele says the CBN will continue, like its counterparts in other countries, to support the government in running the economy positively. In Abuja, Leah Katumbaba today.
Now, joining me to talk more on the MPC decision to increase interest rate is an economist, Yushewu Aliyu. Good to have you join us again.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you.
It's been a while.
Yeah, thank you. But we are back on track.
We're back on track. Good to have you.
Thank you.
Well, did you see it coming? 16.5 to 17.5, like 100 basis point increase. In the last year, we have seen consecutive increases of this interest rate by the CBN. I think 4 times at a stretch. Did you see it coming? And what's the possible impact?
I didn't see it coming because we called the attention of the bank that when raising MPR, you must make sure that you are in control of liquidity, because the essence of raising MPR is to control money supply. And once the CBN attested that over 80% is out of its own control, so there is no need you raise any rate in an attempt to bring back the glory or to bring back the control of the liquidity. That has been my stand. And in an attempt also to check inflation using the MPR, I have said it time without number that there must be certain economic ingredients that must remain constant. If things are constant and the CBN now involved in taking and raising the rate up, then it means that other things are working, but not in an economy that the whole liquidity is outside. That is one. 2, even most of the businesses are conducted with cash outside the bank. That is to store the financial illiteracy of most of the consumers and the household in the economy. So if we are given an instance where other economies are using these parameters to control inflation, it's not going to work, because the supply bottleneck has been attached. Even when the CBN is making presentation at the MPC meeting or 189th MPC meeting, they have addressed exogenous forces to our inflation and the energy costs. So if these costs are not within the context of our economy, then raising the rate will only push the pressure on inflation higher. And that is why the CBN did not make use of the accurate statistics given by the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics. When a lot of people are being pushed into poverty to about 133 million, and you are still pushing the pressure on prices, this will make more people poorer, because whatever the consequence that will be is pushing the price upward, because the MPR is pushed by 100 basis and the inflation is only pushed down by only 13 basis. So when you,
and that one is even month on month, not the year on year.
Not year on year. So I think the CBN is not the right time to put the 100 basis at this point, even if the fact that there has been contentious decision, meaning that it's not unanimous. Some are for 150 basis, some are for 50 basis. But at the end, those with 100 basis took it. And that is why today the MPR...
Those with the highest votes took the day.
Took the day. But that does not mean that they are right. looking at the inflation on the economy, looking at the factors that push the inflation.
There are two things you raised now, talking about curbing inflation, which is one of the reasons given for this, and the other, you're talking about 80% of money outside the banking system. Don't you think this decision is also as a result of policies that are being implemented, which we're also looking at a few days where we have the January 31st deadline for this currency exchange? Don't you think much has been achieved in that light to warrant part of this decision at this time?
What I expected is to say the Monetary Policy Committee to highlight that the central bank told us that 80% is outside the banking vault. So
possibly that's no longer the figure.
If it is not the figure, the central bank in the MPC meeting supposed to have addressed the Nigerian people that so far so commitment has been made, and so factors has been responsible, and so target has been achieved. Remember, the CBN highlighted categorically that even the projected GDP growth based on the MPR and CRR, the CBN projected 2.88% increase, while the IMF predicted 3%, while the federal government projected 4.2%. So when you look at these discrepancies, you realize that CBN in the projection of GDP is more realistic. So if they are more realistic in that growth rate, for 2023, then the same CBN should have understood that once you have 133 million people, their purchasing power has been eroded. And if it is eroded, they have less to play in the economic activity of that same economy within that parameter. But the CBN was busy explaining the commitment so far, the injection made, which is not the actual things that we require to hear, because once you put Naira redesign, Naira design is a good policy, and I am still with the central bank for 31st, because the essence is to control money supply. So it is not a political issue when Senate would direct the CBN to extend, because the CBN has forgotten the fact that this CBN is being guided by a parliamentary act, which is the CBN Act, and which they are to, if they are to remain committed to what they are doing, then political hands should not be there to checkmate the excesses. But the CBN also must consider what I'm expecting on 31st of this month. The CBN will explain the total volume of social liquidity
that has been outside is now back.
And therefore, based on that fact, if what is expected, 50% is not back, then there must be extension. If 75% of what is expected to be back, then there will not be extension, but only to use certain windows to accommodate realistic, because most of the people crying for this increase, especially the common people, if you check 100%, you realize that 70% of the people who are looking for extension don't even have cash, because what they are managing is below 30,000 naira. So you now, but the business people, you must consider them. Because the business environment where there is no bank, like the case the NTA has highlighted in Yobe State, where about more than 7 local governments are carved out from the financial sector delivery. Therefore, there must be a window to which that can be assisted.
That should be an opportunity to kind of extend the financial inclusion campaign.
Excellent.
Because this is actually bringing out the real issues, particularly in the rural areas, where at this moment we're also having reports in some quarters that small business owners are refusing to collect the old Naira notes at this time, insisting on the new Naira. And it's also affecting not just the exchange of goods and services, but also commodities that have to do with food.
Yes, and that is a wrong perception and wrong commitment by the banks and the central bank. Because once you
but the central bank will tell you they've done the needful. Possibly
they have not done the
commercial
needful.
banks at that level.
The issue is simple. If the ATM, when you listen carefully to the central bank governor, he has highlighted a media question was posed to him about the relationship between the central bank and the commercial bank. And the central bank told the Nigerian people that they gave the banks directives to put new notes in the money, while in the evening they should use old note. So if you use that as parameter based on non-availability of those new cash in the banks, then there must also be certain consideration to vulnerable consumers or household, because.
But remember, the whole idea is to discourage you from having too much cash in your wallet to move around with at the end of the day. Though, well, the CBN governor yesterday said more, the minting company is printing more and more will be in circulation. Away from this limits or the 31st deadline, let's talk about the interest rate increase by the CBN. You seem to align the NPR. You seem to align with the school of thought that believe instead of controlling inflation, it might trigger some sort of inflation. Take, for instance, the interest rate has increased to 17.5.
Yes.
That is the lending rate to commercial banks.
Yes.
Now, commercial banks lending to you and I, the interest rate would increase, might be, we don't know the percentage point, but there should be a benchmark to that. Considering that cost of production will increase for those in the productive sector, cost of commodities will increase, food items and all of that, which means your purchasing power is still being affected. Won't we have a situation where still more money chasing few goods?
That is a scenario. And like I said initially, the central bank ought to have made a decision that, for instance, the Naira redesign is a policy. And it is a policy necessitated based on certain conditions. Our appetite to cash has to be reduced. I quite agree that we should be cashless. But I have stressed time with that number. The CBN has introduced concept that was more friendlier at the initial stage of these cashless policies, where they take you and I in Abuja to be cashless. Mr. Obi and Mr. Tunde in Lagos should be cashless. Not everybody can be cashless at the same time, because most of us, it's a process. And since it is a process, looking at the constituency, now we are going to election. And that is why those who are of the opinion that some the facilities do we have the facility the infrastructure, is it existing? I said yes, because most of the polling stations we use electronic voting, and it is working all around the clock.
Since we are going to use electronics for voting, we should also use electronics to make transactions.
To make transactions.
That's a good one. Thank you so very much, Shehu Aliu, for sharing your thoughts with us at this particular point in time.
Thank you very much.
It's a conversation that is continuous.
Thank
we'll
you.
get to revisit it.
Thank you.
Good to have you.
Yes.
Well, moving on, stocks in Nigeria made a rebound midweek to overturn losses 1 day after the Central Bank of Nigeria's Monetary Policy Committee raised the benchmark rate by 100 basis points. The all-share index rose to 52,599.65 points, while equity capitalization also rose to 28.649 trillion naira. 119 million shares worth 2.689 billion naira were traded in 3,552 deals. Mutual Benefits, Transcap and Gerigu Power Plant topped the activity chart in that order. Now let's join Eneka Oko for global stock market update.
Global stocks paused near 5-month highs this Wednesday, as signs that central banks might need to keep hiking interest rates for longer dampened a recent wave of optimism. European markets were lower following a loss in the previous session, despite data showing improved business sentiment in Germany and an uptick in Eurozone services and manufacturing activity. The DAX declined 0.51%, and the FTSE lost 0.06%, while the French CAC slipped 0.44%. U.S. stock futures also slumped in early trading as traders pondered over the latest batch of corporate earnings. The Dow Jones Industrial Average slipped 0.58%, S&P 500 futures fell 0.75%, and Nasdaq 100 shed 1.15%. Asian stocks traded mixed, taking the lead from Wall Street's struggle for direction as China and Hong Kong markets remain closed for the Lunar New Year holidays. Japan's Nikkei 225 added 0.35% to 27,395.01, and the Topix inched up 0.39%. African stocks were slightly down this Wednesday, tracking global sentiment. South Africa, Kenya, and Tunisia all ticked down, while Namibia and Ghana were flat.
On that global note, we end Business Express for today. Business Express returns tomorrow, Thursday at 9:30 a.m. Join us.